Welcome to Tennis Channel Inside In on the Tennis Channel Podcast Network. Mitch Michals here in the Santa Monica studios. As always, another podcast, another conversation with a member of the tennis community. We have a good one today. I'm going to throw out the word legendary. It's a coach in the game for several decades with tons of players, guiding Jim Courier to world number one, working with the USTA, head coach in the past at Fresno State, now working with Tommy Paul, who had quite the run at Indian Wells and is playing his best tennis. It's Brad Stine joining us on location in Indian Wells. As you can see in his background, if you're watching this on video, we got quite the location. Brad, thanks for joining the show.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. I really appreciate you guys asking me.
Yeah, it's great to be able to talk with you. As I said, you've been involved in the game for so long and shaped some of the game's best players, especially in America. Starting with that, and we try to just do the backstory here. It is hard. You're kind of a man of mystery for your origin story. There's not a lot about you. I know you, San Mateo.
That's good. I like that, actually.
Yeah, I know you like the outdoor activities. So I'm wondering if just wanting to be outside is kind of where the love of tennis started. And, you do your rock climbing, I think snowboarding in there, but where did the tennis love come from in California?
I mean, I was actually a baseball player as a kid. That was my first passion and my first love as a sport. And I got into tennis pretty late, for what we talk about most of the time nowadays. I really started playing tennis around 14 and a half. I actually played my first tournament ever when I was 15 years old. I just got into it late, and I was going to go to high school, and I was trying to kind of decide between tennis and baseball at that time, and broken my nose a couple times in baseball and gotten beat up a little bit by it and stuff, and I made this big decision in my own life to kind of go to tennis, and that's where I started. And I played junior tennis in Northern California, and then biggest thing for me from my own standpoint, from my own tennis, was big decision to go to junior college at Kenyatta Junior College, and they had a very, very good coach that was working there. He was working with a couple of pros at the time, and that was really a big thing for me as far as like growing as a player, and also learning some of the fundamentals that, like, even to this day, from a technical standpoint, I still use in my coaching.
And you said something very interesting there, and I'm just going back to it. You didn't start playing tennis till age 14. You go from baseball to tennis. Did you feel like it was a little later in development that you might have missed out on? Boy, if I would have started earlier, I could have gotten into a higher level of tennis, because you still played at an exceptionally high level, which is remarkable for starting just at 14.
Yeah, I mean, it's always been a bit of a lament in my own life that I didn't get started earlier. I felt like it always hurt me. I would say probably one of the worst parts of my game as a player was my return, and I always felt like not having grown up playing more junior tennis from a younger age was a big factor in that, actually.
And that decision to kind of get into coaching, I mean, I'm looking at it from the outside too. Like, you played tennis, you were a late beginner. Maybe the potential was capped because of that, but do you think that might have pushed you into, you fell in love with this game later in life? Now there is an avenue to work in it and get involved in the coaching.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, because I wasn't a great player by any means. I mean, I was an okay player. I played Division I college tennis. I beat a few guys here and there. I played some money tournaments and stuff like that, and I had some decent wins. I never had a lot of like really big, like, consistent processes where I played really well. I went to Europe and I played money tournaments in France for 3 or 4 summers, which was a great experience. I played a number of guys that ended up becoming top 100 players. So I mean, I loved playing. I really, really, really wanted to be a player. I mean, like, it was like a passion to want to be a player. At the same time, that same coach that I played for at Kenyatta Junior College, he used to always have a saying that if you wanted to be a great player, you needed to become a student of the game. And I think that that's something that really, stuck with me, and that because I wasn't a great player, and because maybe I was a late bloomer coming in, I really grasped that process and really tried to become a student of the game. and I think that then translated a lot to the coaching. And I do have to say that, listen, I got into coaching when I did because of another great mentor of mine, a legend in the college game, Greg Patton. Greg, at that time, when I was 26 years old, he was coaching the U.S. Junior Davis Cup team, which is what we called our junior national team back then. And Greg called me and asked me to be his assistant coach. And at the time, I was planning on going back to France to play one more year in France. Now I thought, this is going to kind of be my last year to really play. I'm going to have to get a little bit serious, find a job, do something.
Yeah.
I was basically being kind of a tennis bum at that point, And I'd already bought a ticket to go to France, and I was planning on spending 3 or 4 months there just playing tournaments and making a little money and having a good time. And Greg, we had 2 phone calls that probably lasted at least an hour or so each time. And he basically just talked me into taking the position working with the Junior Davis Cup team. And that was a massive, massive decision. One, because he was a great mentor as a coach, but it also put me in touch with Courier and Chang and Sampras and Jonathan Stark and Jeff Tarango and all these guys that were part of that upcoming group of tennis that dominated, the world scene kind of in the 90s. So that was such a huge decision for me to be able to be part of that program.
So that was mid 80s. And that was your first job in tennis as coaching, was working with those guys.
It's funny that
Courier, Sampras,
it wasn't my first. I was the assistant coach at Fresno State at that time already, but it really was a massive introduction to coaching at the high performance level.
Right. And did you realize how insane that talent boom was? Like, I'm rattling off those names. I didn't even get to like Todd Martin, Malavey, Washington, Wheaton. Like, did you realize at the time as a young coach, young student of the game, like, this is something special, like this crop of talent, this depth doesn't come along that often?
Yeah. It's funny because if Greg Patton, he's got such an incredibly infectious personality. And I was probably a little bit too young and hadn't been around that level enough to recognize how good all those guys were at that point already, much less how good they were going to be down the road. But Greg kind of did. And so Greg was pushing that narrative all the time. And that got into my head a little bit, so I did from that standpoint. He kind of like, got me to realize the level of talent that we had amongst that group. And I don't think he or I would have ever expected that the number of guys from that group that made top 100 would have actually all gotten there. But it was an astounding group of guys that we had an opportunity to be involved with. And that all, so many of those guys made the top 100.
And Brad, one of the things with coaches I'm always curious and fascinated by is when or how over time they develop their style. When do you think your coaching style kind of took form? Was it right from the get-go? Did you have like a way to deal, or did you kind of evolve with how the game was going, how the players you worked with were going? How did you develop that style?
Yeah, I think that I had a basic foundation of how I wanted to teach the game from a technical standpoint from pretty early on, just from people that I had worked with and been involved with, and again, I go back to that coach at Kenyatta Junior College. That there was a guy who was actually a teaching pro in Fresno that I worked with a little bit post Fresno State when I finished my playing time at Fresno State, a guy named Kyler Legler that was a bit of a guru of the game. And those guys were advocates early on of a little bit more of an open stance footwork position, which wasn't very common at that time. And that was something that I took on in my own mentality. And then, listen, I've been so lucky over the course of my career to be involved with really, really great mentors. Like I said, that, Rich Anderson at Kenyatta Junior College. And then I went from him to Greg Patton, who, one of the best motivational guys in the game, and a guy that really taught me that there was a lot more to coaching than just the technical aspects of it or even the tactical aspects of it. Greg was a big morals and ethics guys with the guys that we worked with, and really, demanded a standard of conduct with those guys. And that's something that I've always been pretty strong with, and then I went from there to spending a lot of time with Tom Gullickson. And I mean, that was a massive opportunity for me to be around a guy who had played at the level that Gully had played at, but also was such a great tactician as a coach, and I learned so much spending time around him. When I was working for the USTA, Gully and I did 16 weeks straight on the road from the start of the summer to the end of the summer, finished at the juniors at the US Open one year. And man, I learned so much with him, and we also drank a lot of beers.
Yeah.
And then finally, let me finish, because then finally Jose Higueras. I mean, and and Jose, I think is, to this day is just such a special mind within our game, and I got a chance to be around and work with him so closely. That really all those guys. And at that point, I mean, when I was working with Jose, I was still only 31 years old when I first started being around Jose on a regular basis, so I was very lucky to, at a pretty early age, have gotten some amazing exposure with some great coaches.
Yeah, and I got to think as well, part of it, maybe more of it as the older you got, was learning how to, manage people, manage players, get through to a player that is willing to work, wants to be the best, has all the skills. And I've even heard you say in other interviews, at the top of the game, it's nuances. It's not much. And, there isn't a handbook for managing people, managing players when, the going gets tough.
Yeah, 100%. And again, I do think, I was very lucky that when I started full-time with Jim Courier, for example, I came straight out of collegiate tennis. And one of the great things about coaching in college tennis is that it's a very autocratic society. What the coach says goes, period. Yep. That's it, and we have one of the greatest tools in sports in collegiate tennis that we don't have in pro tennis. It's called the bench.
Playing time. Yeah.
Yeah. Playing time is so big. Obviously, everybody wants to play, everybody wants to be in the game, but you can sit guys, and guys don't want to sit. Guys want to be able to play. And so that was a big thing. And I was a little bit of an autocratic type of coach coming out of collegiate tennis. And so when I went on the tour and was working with Jim, I kind of carried that over, and I kind of approached Jim, as he was a 20-year-old when I first started with him. So he really would have been, kind of a junior in college probably. And I kind of approached him as a guy that would be on my college tennis team. And it was kind of like, look, what I say goes. And Jim, to his credit, was an extremely coachable guy. And he took on that same mentality that, like, look, I'm looking to you to tell me what I'm supposed to be doing, and then I'll implement it. And obviously if he didn't agree, then, he would voice that opinion. But it was also lucky for me that what we were implementing was coming also from Jose primarily. Jose was really directing the ship at that time, and I was implementing Jose's plan as a coach.
Brad Stine here on Tennis Channel Inside In. You mentioned it, the partnership with Jim Courier, 90 to 94, a heck of a run there. We'll get to the stats in just a second, but you mentioned his coachability. Behind the curtain, was that what, because we always want to know, what did the greats have? He got to number one, so few have, and there's skill level, there's work ethic. We know how intense he was on the court. Do you think it was that coachability and the ability to kind of just listen and make adjustments that set him apart?
I mean, it's funny because I say all the time, when I do these kind of things and I have an opportunity to speak about that time, Jim was probably the most coachable player in a lot of ways, but he was also the most stubborn player in a lot of ways. And both those two characteristics, I think, translated to his ability to maximize what he had as a player, and I think that Jose recognized right away, and it's become a foundation of what I do with players, that Jim was pretty much incapable of defending on the backhand side prior to working with Jose and I. And Jose recognized that right away, and he implemented and had us work on and practice a slice backhand every single day for the first year that we were together. And we did it every single day. Regardless of whether he had a match or not, we would practice slice backhand. And I'm convinced to this day developing the slice backhand is what really translated from a technical and a tactical standpoint to allowing Jim to progress to the top 10 and then even to number one. You know, I mean, and obviously a big part of that is also just how mentally strong and mentally tough he was. He also had one of the biggest, you know, best forehands in the game at that time. But he prior to that, he wasn't able to defend at all really on the backhand side. And all of a sudden he was able to stay in points with guys much longer.
Well, 4 Grand Slam titles during that run, 12 tournaments. Do you look back and just, I mean, I don't want to say think how lucky you were, but just how special that time was, because you were still a young guy at the moment, just really starting your pro coaching career. And there you are at the helm of one of the great runs in tennis.
Yeah, and I've been living on it ever since. I mean, come on.
You said it. Nobody else did. Yeah.
I mean, no, I mean, trust me, in the moment you're just loving it and absorbing it and everything that's going on. Just trying to, you know, keep them at that level and keep working and keep progressing. But, you know, as time passes and you look back on it, I mean, such an amazing, you know, situation and for him to have won 4 slams, seven slam finals, you know, that course of time was just really, really exceptional.
Do you have any, I mean, I like to dig into the stories if we can, because everyone talks about that 91 French Open final with the rain delays against Agassi. And one of the things that's came out is, and Jim's even said this, the tactical adjustments. So what, if anything, can you share from that moment where you guys maybe went to plan B and you saw a coaching game plan go through?
Listen, that was all Jose, because the first title that Jim won in 91 at the French, I was being paid at that time by the USTA. And so we were working with a number of other players, and I actually left Paris after the semis to go to England and be with Todd Martin and a number of other guys that were playing on the grass in Queens. So I watched that final from the locker room in Queens, and Jose was the mastermind of going into the locker room during that rain delay and telling Jim to back up from the baseline a little bit and return from a deeper position in the court.
Okay. I'll attribute that to some work on the practice court with you as well, you know, to kind of give you some credit there. But in the other side of it, I'm sure you learned a lot at the elite level of, you know, how to handle when there's just nothing you can really do. I look at that 93 Wimbledon final against Sampras where Courier was playing well, but there's really not much you can do when an all-time great is just painting lines on those clutch serves in the moments that he does. So did you look at like when there's a loss where, okay, sometimes you just got to tip your hat?
Yeah. I mean, you know, it's funny that match obviously stands out, and Jim had a set point to go up 2-1 in the third set breaker, you know, and Pete kind of pushed the backhand volley into the backhand corner for Jim, and Jim missed a passing shot on set point to go up 2-1. That match could have potentially gone a different way if he makes that ball. But it's funny, I always remember there was a match early on, the first year that I worked with Jim in 91, where we came back from Australia and we went to Memphis for the old Memphis tournament, which I wish was still there, but and he lost first round to Derek Rostagno. And that was after he had made a semi in Adelaide and made 4th round in Australia, lost in 5, I think, to Stefan Edberg in the round of 16 at the Aussie, you know, and we felt like we were really on a good path already. Jim was ranked around 25 in the world at that time. And he played Derek Rostagno, if you remember Derek Rostagno. And he got beat pretty bad. I think it was like a 3-3 or a 3-4 match or something like that. And we went and got a late night, because it was a night match. We went and got a late night, you know, some food to eat at some little greasy spoon in Memphis someplace, I think. And I remember we were sitting down and I said to Jim, you know, Jim, is there anything that we didn't do leading into the match? Is there anything I didn't do? Is there something I could have done better to help prepare you? Is there something we could have done better to? And Jim said, you know, look, this is pro tennis, and on any given night, anybody can beat anybody. And he goes, and the line that always stuck out to me was, he said, look, even the Lakers lose sometimes. And if you recall, back in those days, the Lakers were dominating pretty much everybody.
Wow.
And that always kind of stuck in my mind. So yeah, to answer your question, that you look at it, and there's certain times, there's certain matches, even in the biggest moments, where, man, the other guy just outperforms you for whatever reason, and you end up coming up short.
That's incredible that he had that perspective, and it might be another thing that separates some of these greats. That coaching partnership lasted about 4 years. And not just that individual relationship, but in general, with your perspective as a coach, is there a time when you realize it's run its course, where no hard feelings, but it just seems like a new voice in the room is good for all sides, and it seems like these relationships do run their course after a few seasons?
Yeah, I think it's less common to have guys that stick together for a super long time. You look at, like, Andreas Seppi, for example, has been with the same coach forever. Now we have Jensen Brooksby, who, he hasn't been at the pro level with Joey Gilbert forever, but they've been working together since he was like 7 years old. There's a few like that, that are long-term situations, and the same coach stays with the same player forever. I personally love to see those situations. My situation with Jim at the time was a little bit different. I had known Jim because of Junior Davis Cup since he was 15 years old. We had stayed in touch from the time that, we got to know each other. We spent about 4 years together in that first run. And, we were always working as a team, Jose, myself, and Jim. And to be honest with you, I got approached in 1994 by another player. Someone kind of organized that, told me that the guy was interested in speaking to me, and so I sat down with him, went to dinner, and kind of made him a proposal, and he said he wanted to work with me. And at the time, as much as I was loving being with Jim and had learned so much from under Jose, I kind of wanted to be on my own and take responsibility for, wins and losses completely on my own. And so when the player was Andre Medvedev, who at the time was ranked 4 in the world. And, so I did speak to Jim's agent and to Jose, and ultimately to Jim, and kind of asked them what their feeling was. And it was always kind of a funny thing. Jim said, "Look, man, that's an unbelievable opportunity for you. I completely understand." That being said, Jim didn't say hello to me for like about a year and a half after that. Like, I always said hi to him, and everything, and he would kind of grunt at me now and then.
Well, he doesn't really badmouth you now, so you did something right there. So he didn't.
Yeah, I mean, we had I call it Courier 1 and Courier 2. Those first 4 years, and then I spent about 2.5 years working with some other guys, and then Jim asked me to come back and work with him again. And I worked with him until he retired. So we ended on a good note, that's for sure.
So that's, and that's, I guess, kind of when you've made it as a coach, right? Is when you're kind of sought after. Like, people want to work with you, and not that, you would be struggling for these jobs, but you coach a number one player. Now I think that's validation. Like, okay, now you're kind of sought after. Players want to work with you directly.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, that's kind of, I was semi-joking, but semi-serious. I've been living off the Jim Courier, ever since. But it's true. You lucky enough to be in the box for 3 out of those 4 Grand Slam titles, and all 3 of the other finals. And obviously Jim's, climbed to number 1. And so you've seen that process, and you've seen what it takes, and you've seen, all the work and all the effort that goes into it. And so players do kind of seek that out,
More with Brad Stine here on Tennis Channel Inside In. Some of the other players you've worked with, I want to get to the Kevin Anderson run. I know we're kind of jumping ahead, but you being at Wimbledon when he made his run, but also had some of the longest Wimbledon match we'll ever see, because they changed the rules. But he beats Federer, and then he beats Isner in that marathon match. But what I thought was so interesting was, after he beat Federer, you've gone on record as said, I was more concerned and impressed with his ability to stay in the moment. Now you beat Federer. We see the letdown so many times when an all-time great gets beat, that the next match, that player that beats him loses. And you were impressed with, he was able to manage his moment and kind of redline after that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's a funny moment in a way. After Kevin beat Roger, I I was waiting for him in kind of the warm up cool down area. And I actually put a couple of, little plyo boxes, and I stood up on him so I could look him eye to eye, because obviously Kevin's 6'8", I'm 5'9", so I spent most of my time with Kevin, like this, looking up at him. And so I wanted to be able to look him in the eye. And the first thing I said to him when he walked in was that look, I said, great win, phenomenal match, Kev. You have now put yourself in a position to have a chance to win Wimbledon. And we have to focus on what comes next. So you don't have a lot of time to celebrate this win. And he immediately, in a very calm way, said, absolutely 100%. Know exactly what the target is. And then was able to go out in that semifinal match against John and reproduce some really, really phenomenal tennis. The shot that sticks out, obviously, is the diving left-handed forehand in the game that he finally broke in.
Mm-hmm. What's it like being in the box for, I guess, any big match, but that match in particular, where it's just going on and on? There's so many serves with stakes on the line, and you see a shot like that. I got to think it's as draining as this profession gives you.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, it's mentally and emotionally very taxing. That's for sure. You can't imagine just sitting and watching a match like that, how drained you feel at the end of the match. Obviously elated when you win, but it's tiring, And as Jim Courier said to me after that match, it was all about the rally cap at 22 all. I don't know if you remember that or not, but
I do.
And myself and a number of Kevin's buddies that he played college tennis with at Illinois, they all knew what a rally cap was. We all turned our hats inside out and backwards and did rally caps. But we did it I think it was at 24 all maybe, or something like that. Jim said, you have to know the moment when you do the rally cap. Don't do it too early. Yeah,
I don't know if the All England Club and the normal spectators know what a rally cap is,
exactly.
But the Midwest guys know. And, kind of just get more on the serious side. One of the other players you worked with was Mardy Fish, and, he's gone public with his battles in the past. And I just wanted to know your perspective of his going public with something so serious, shedding light to it. And if you knew that this was, obviously you probably knew that there was more to the battle than under the surface, but just a thought on what Mardy Fish has done and how he's gone public with, trying to help people that have his same problem.
Mardy and I worked together when Mardy was very young. So we started when Mardy was 18 years old. And I spent a couple of years with him. He went from about, I think 365 or 370 in the world to like 110. When we stopped. USTA came in and gave him a coach at that time for free. And but there were some indications already at that time. Mardy had a whole routine for flying at that time. He was very uncomfortable in the taking off and landing process of a flight. Once he got up in the air, he was okay. But he was already working, even at 18, he was already working with a sports psychologist, I think, not so much for his tennis as much as that anxiety that he felt about flying. That was a big issue for him. And so, I was already aware of that. It never became an issue to the point where, he couldn't get on a flight or wouldn't go somewhere or something like that. But there were indications of that already. As far as his tennis goes, like on court competing and stuff like that, there wasn't really much of that I saw back in those days. I think that's something that kind of developed as he progressed through the game. And winning is great. Winning can also become a burden. And, as Mardy progressed through the game and got to be, where he was going to crack the top 10 and was going to surpass Andy Roddick and become the number one player in America and all of a sudden be in the conversation for big titles. I mean, I think that's when that pressure built up on him and his issues creeped in a little bit more,
Yeah. It's inspiring that he's been able to go public and just share the battle that, he didn't have to do in the name of helping people. And watching his documentary, I did think it was a very astute observation that, they asked him and Roddick why did the American tennis bubble burst? And he said, the bubble was Federer, Djokovic, and Nadal. That's what burst the bubble. It's those guys just winning all the Grand Slams.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, you know. I mean, that every generation has their guys they have to deal with, you know, and they're absolutely right. I mean, you know, when Roger and Rafa and Novak were all young at the different times that they came out and started playing, I mean, you wouldn't have necessarily predicted that, you know, they would have 61 Grand Slams between the three of them, which is, it's insane. It's astronomical that they actually have that. You know, that Rafa just won his 21st Grand Slam is insane. And this generation of tennis that we've been enjoying is just, it'll be hard to imagine that, you know, it'll be surpassed anytime soon.
It's insane. It really is. I can put it. Getting back to the present, how did the relationship come to be with your current pupil, Tommy Paul, who's on quite a heater after beating Zverev at Indian Wells?
Yeah, Tommy. You know, I was running my little academy. I had a little academy that I was doing out of where I live in Fresno, California, and was really having a good time actually doing that. And we were lucky enough to work with some really good young players that have all become very good Division I players at the time. But I got a call from Jay Berger asking about my interest level in working with the USTA again. And my life was in a little bit of a different place at that point. I'd gotten divorced. My kids were all a little bit older. I'd had opportunities to work with the USTA in the past, but, you know, they always wanted you to either move to Carson or move to, you know, Florida. And my kids were younger. I was still married at the time. And so I'd always kind of turned it down. And at that time, I was just in a different place in my life. And so I told Jay I was definitely interested, and went back and you know, talked to them a little bit and ended up taking that position. And that position really is what put me in touch with, you know, this current generation of players again. And, you know, I don't think Tommy or Riley Opelka or Francis or Taylor or, you know, any of those guys amongst that group really knew who I was prior to that, you know. Yeah. And so I got a chance to go back and get to know those guys a little bit. I wasn't working with them directly, but you know, they were around on a regular basis, and I was super good friends. And Tom Gullickson again was working at the USTA at the same time, and so you know, what I had done in the past kind of filtered to those guys through Gully, I think, you know, and all of a sudden there was a little heightened degree of respect from the guys. They weren't like, oh, this is just some guy that's, you know, random coach they hired from someplace. So and you know, and that just, I met those guys, I think when they were about 15, and saw them develop over the course of time that I was with the USTA. And I went on a couple trips with Tommy and those guys to some junior events and also to some futures, and just spent time around them. And then you know, Kevin was struggling a little bit in 2019 with some physical issues, and at the end of the year, he was unable to play at the US Open. Tommy was there. Tommy and I talked a little bit there. Tommy had lost in qualifying, and he knew that Kevin was going to have knee surgery. And so he messaged me and he asked me if I would just help him out through the end of the year. And it kind of started out as a you know, part-time thing, just to kind of, because he knew I wasn't going to be with Kevin through the end of the year. Yeah. And things went really, really well. Tommy won 2 challengers early on, made the top 100 for the first time. And so ultimately he asked me if I would work with him full time.
Yeah, he's still young. I think 24 right now. And, you know, for having gone through the career he's had, the Junior French Open, some struggles, and then getting back and still being young. It's funny. I spoke with him about 2 years ago, when the pandemic was kind of getting going, and he was trying to get back on the court. And he said, I got to get in better shape. Like, I've just been sitting around. I have to get in shape. So was that part of like your work with him? I know the forehand change is been talked about a lot, that you tactically went and we're like, we got to fix this thing. But how much of what you've worked on has been technical? Has it been mental, you know, improving him to realistically being playing the best tennis of his life since he's been working with you?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a little bit of everything with Tommy, really. You know, it's been a little bit of everything. I mean, we've talked at different times about when I first started with him, in the first week that we worked together, I gave him a list of 11 things that I either wanted him to eliminate, add, or adjust. And so, and he embraced all those things. And that was during a challenger that he was playing that he ended up winning. So Tommy, I have found to be incredibly coachable, and he has a very high tennis IQ. He really understands the game, and he understands his own game. He's really been accepting of the process that we've been going through to kind of build him to this point where he's at now, as much more of an attacking tennis player than he was when we first started. So I give him a lot of credit. Like, all the players that you work with, obviously they have to put in the work and they have to buy into the ideas that you're presenting to them, and Tommy's really done that.
And you've said as well, like leading up to the title in Stockholm to end last season, he was on the verge of a breakthrough. You, I guess I would assume, see that a lot when players are building towards it. There's only one winner every week, but how identifiable is it where you can tell, okay, there's good signs here, he's improving, we're close here, something's about to happen?
Yeah, no, I did feel like that. I felt like that all the way back to the start of the clay court season that year, because he was playing very good tennis during the clay court season. I mean, he was really, really pushing guys. He was winning some tough matches, but at the same time, he wasn't getting quite as much benefit as you would hope. He had 6 break points in the third set against Rublev in Madrid in the second round, and then and ended up losing the match. And he played Batista Agut twice, and played very good for periods within the matches, but not good enough to even win a set. Played really well in Rome in the qualifying, battling through qualifying. And I just felt that he was really striking the ball well and hitting the ball well. And then unfortunately he didn't get a chance to play the grass last year due to an injury that he had with his foot.
Yeah.
And then again, we went into the summer, and the summer was the same, good play, quality matches. You could see the level that he was playing at was better and better, but again, not quite getting the kind of benefit that you wanted to. He did beat Guerin in Cincinnati. He was playing qualies, he was going through qualies, and he was toughing out matches in qualies, and playing really well. And actually, like, those matches don't count on your win-loss record for the ATP, but he was winning a lot of matches, because he was going through qualies at that time. And then when we went into the fall, he really, really, really at that point embraced the more aggressive style. And the indoors obviously lent itself to him playing like that. And again, was just playing really sharp tennis. Had a really, really high quality match against Taylor Fritz in Moscow that he ended up losing. But man, the tennis was so good. And then the same thing happened the next week in St. Petersburg against Cilic. And it was a little bit frustrating. I was just hoping that he wasn't going to get kind of disheartened mentally, because he wasn't necessarily getting the results that you wanted. And then obviously we went to Paris, played well again in Paris, wins around in the main draw, goes 3 sets with Hubie Hurkacz, and again, like, was right there in the match, but just doesn't quite get it done. And it was like, it was frustrating. I mean, I was frustrated a little bit. I was just, kicking myself every time I'd get back to my room and be like, man, just got to get through one of these matches, and then we go to Stockholm and everything just came together match after match. And that was the first tournament where obviously he had pushed through and, got past a quarter, wins a semi, and then ends up winning the tournament. And to Tommy's credit, I just heard him on something that he was speaking about recently. He then took that result, and rather than getting a little bit satisfied with it, he actually pushed himself and had a phenomenal offseason. He really worked hard during the offseason and got in amazing shape. A lot of credit to his strength and conditioning coach, Franco Herrero, that he works with in Boca. I mean, those two guys, they put in a lot of time and effort in last year's off season, and he really jumped right into it again the start of this year again. So
yeah, no, he really did put in the hard yards, as they say. And just one last thing on Tommy Paul is that I have a bunch of friends who I would consider as casual tennis fans, and we look at it like, you know, who are players to watch? They're asking me all the time, who's somebody outside the big three to watch? And he's a name that keeps coming up. I give him, okay, watch Tommy Paul. There's like a crossover appeal with his aggressive style, the one that you've implemented, with his flair to the game. Do you sense that he's, you know, translating that to the masses?
yeah, absolutely. Because, you know, like when he beats Zverev, and not just Zverev, but plenty of other matches, you know, especially like, again, going back to that fall period. I mean, I'm getting messages from people that I know, but also just fans here in Indian Wells. I've had a lot of people just, you know, around the grounds that have come up and said, like, man, so much fun to watch Tommy play. Love the style that he's playing. It's just so enjoyable to watch, you know. And we're not, you know, it wasn't our goal to create something that was necessarily aesthetically pleasing for the fans to watch. You know, it's the way that we feel that he can maximize his game style and his attributes as an athlete and everything else. But I think it is a little bit of a different presentation. And, you know, I think that the best and most enjoyable tennis matches are usually created between opposing styles. And we have so many guys in the game that obviously love to sit back on the baseline and just bang balls. So when you get a guy that's playing a style where he's attacking more and coming forward, those kind of contradictory styles create really entertaining matches.
You said one thing I just don't want to gloss over, the match that he lost where he had a bunch of set points and couldn't convert. How do you handle the post match with a player after a match like that? Do you just come in like, oh, don't worry about it, or do you, like, you know, avoid them? Like that's something I don't know. Like, how do you handle a player
no,
that
it's
match on the racket?
Listen, there's only two things that I ever get really upset about, you know, with players, and I tell players this. I've always pre-worked this when I first started working with players, you know, is that the only two things that I ever really get angry about are a lack of effort and or poor conduct. You know, I mean, I mean, poor conduct. Look, everybody gets irritated and frustrated in the matches sometimes, and you might, you know, say something or throw a racket, you know, one time. That's not a big deal. But if you're, you know, if it becomes a pattern, then, you know, we're going to deal with it. But as long as his effort is there and he's working as hard as he can within the matches to try and problem solve and figure out what he can do to try and be competitive in the matches, you know, I'm never going to be, you know, particularly negative after the matches. You know, we try to focus on the things that he did well, and then also look at the areas that he has to improve in and get better from match to match. And then, you know, get out and focus on those things within the context of his practices and stuff.
Yeah. Like, just don't say, like, for example, like, you guys are all corrupt to the umpire. That would probably be more conduct.
That was a rough one. I was commentating that match. I was commentating that match in Australia. Yeah, that's I mean, that's such a childish comment, you know, and also pretty unprofessional. You know, and I think anybody that's watched Tommy compete over the last year and a half, you know, Tommy's pretty he's pretty level on the court. You know, he doesn't get too pumped up. He doesn't get too irritable and negative on the court either.
A couple more things before we wrap up with Brad Stine here on Tennis Channel Insight In. You referenced that your commentary career down in Australia. Now you're calling matches, and that's, you know, it's interesting. That's kind of when I first heard your voice, was on some of those matches 2 Australian Opens ago, when there was nobody in the arena and you were courtside. Djokovic Zverev was one in particular. How did that come to be? How did you decide you wanted to dabble in commentary, and how much do you enjoy being in the trenches as a broadcaster?
You know, it happened at the 2019 US Open. So that was where Kevin ended up being unable to play. I was still working with Kevin at that time. And I saw, you know, once Kevin had decided that he wasn't going to play, I ran into Jill Krabus, who I'm friends with, and she was doing some commentating, both radio and TV, at the US Open. And I just said, Jill, you know, would you mind checking and seeing if, there's any possibility that I could maybe get involved a little bit. And so she immediately messaged the producer for World Feed, and it turned out that they had a couple people that had some visa issues, and so they were short a couple people, and I got in. And that was the first time I'd ever sat behind a mic and commentated a match at any level. And so it was an interesting experience for me. I was super nervous the first match. I always remember the very first match I did was between Zach Zvajda, who had gotten the wild card from winning the Kalamazoo tournament that year, and he was playing Paolo Lorenzi. And I'm trying to remember who I was doing it with that was doing the color, but thank God for him, because I felt like I was so stiff for the first set or so. And then I made some reference. I don't remember exactly what it was to something. And the producer popped in my ear and said, "Wow, that was a really good one, Brad. Great job." And as soon as he said that, it kind of loosened me up, and I got a little bit more relaxed, and I really, really enjoyed it. And so I did the entire 2 weeks, did some of the pro matches, did some radio, which was really interesting. And did some junior matches, doubles matches, and a bunch of different stuff. And I had a great time doing it, and so I then got the contact for Australia and the French actually at the time. And I emailed them, and they were nice enough to email me back from Australia and said, "We're all set. We don't need anybody." And then at the last minute, again, they had somebody that dropped out for the ATP Cup. That was the inaugural ATP Cup that year. And they said, "Hey, we had someone drop out. Could you come down, like next week?" And I was like, "Sure, I'd love to do it." And so Tommy it was perfect because Tommy was on the team as the alternate. And so I flew down and I commentated the ATP Cup and was with him the whole week. And then, that went well. I don't know what I did, but they seemed to like me. And again, I got a contact that said, "Would you be interested in doing some of the matches at the Australian Open? And we can kind of fit it in around Tommy's schedule. We'll just try and get you in whenever we can." And that was how it started. And then, they've really, really liked me in Australia. I'm not sure. I'm very popular in Australia now. So, so the second year that I went, I got really lucky. And the guy that does, most of the producing down there, he's the big guy in charge of everything. His name's James Watson. He put us in one night on a big match with Mark Pecci, myself, and John Alexander. And what am I saying? John Alexander, John Fitzgerald.
John Fitzgerald.
And,
yeah,
and Fitzy and Petch and I have kind of become the mainstay for the evening matches. Either Fitzy on the court and me in the booth, or me on the court and him in the booth with Petch. And we've done a lot of matches together, the three of us now, and it's been an absolute blast. Those guys are amazing to do it with, and they make it really, really easy, and it's super fun. I really enjoy it.
Yeah, I think the perspective, 3-person booths don't always work. A lot of times they don't work, but just having the balance, you approaching it from a coaching perspective, a coaching background, seeing adjustments, seeing things that are made, and having that courtside view as well. And it's completely different, right? You don't have any real skin in the game. You're not as emotionally invested, but it's still the sport that you love, and you're able to, contribute to the broadcast of some of the iconic matches that we've seen in Australia in the last couple of years.
Yeah, unbelievable. Listen, I did the final this last year with Rafa and Medvedev, and I mean, the end of the fourth set and the end of the fifth set, we went through periods where we didn't say a word for like 10 minutes because, I mean, the tennis was just so phenomenal and off the charts. It was like, man, just let it speak for itself. And I think I've gotten smart enough now that I've been doing it for about 3 or 4 years to recognize that, either that or Petch will look at me and hold a finger up like, "Don't say anything right now," because Petch has such a great feel for everything that's going on within the game.
For sure. Well, Brad, this has been fun. I'm very grateful you're able to take some time to talk to us. It's been a blast. Just want to finish up with, do you think it's, at your point in your career, is it possible for somebody or for you to watch tennis with just casual fans? Do you get amused by people that don't understand the game as much? If you're, leisurely watching the game, do you say, these people were, making comments, they don't really know what they're talking about?
listen, I'm a massive fan of our sport in general. And I think the more people that we can get into the game, that enjoy it, the better off we are. And I like at times, I'll go out. I'm a bit of a gym rat. And so I'll go out and just sit in the stands at any given match and watch matches that I enjoy, the guys that I want to go watch play, girls that I want to go watch play, so you end up just sitting around the average fan and listening to them and talking a little bit here and there. And it's great. It's great. I wish the greatest thing that could possibly happen in tennis is that we get to be like some of the other major sports where there's a lot of people that don't necessarily play the sport, but they know everything about it. You go to a football game or an NBA game and, 2/3 of the people in the stadiums have never played that sport, but man, they know every player, they know every rule, they know everything that goes on within the sport. And that's the way it is, I think, in Europe and South America with tennis, is that people love the sport, not just the players so much. And, I would love to see that kind of happen in the US.
You see yourself in the coach's box for the foreseeable future with Tommy now, of course, but is there an end in sight for you coaching?
Man, I'm not young anymore,
Yeah.
But listen, Tommy's keeping me young, and being around this next generation of American players, and even the guys that are younger than Tommy and Riley and Taylor and Francis, the Jensen Brooksbys and the Nakashimas and those guys that are coming up. I mean, it keeps you young. I used to say that from the time I was coaching collegiate tennis. We get older as coaches, and the players somehow stay the same age all the time because we start with new players. So right now, I'm absolutely loving my part of the process in being with Tommy. Tommy makes it really, really fun, and we're having some success. So it's really enjoyable. I don't see any like stopping point right now. We'll see in another year, 2, 3, 4 down the road.
Yeah, a little dazed and confused reference to end. That was perfect. No, Brad Stine, pleasure. As an analyst, last thing, do you have picks for Indian Wells now that your player is out of it? Do you have any selections for you think holds the titles where you are right now?
I know who I would love to see progress further in the draw and have a chance to maybe play for the title for me, because he's one of the most entertaining guys, and I think that at this point in his career, everybody kind of pulls for him. And it sounds like I'm going to say Rafa, but I'm not. I'm going to say Gael Monfils. I think that he's really making a push again, and it's great to see him back. I think he struggled so much with the pandemic, with not having people in the stands, because he's such a showman and he loves to play for the people and in front of people. And it's great to see him back with his energy and him producing, really, really exceptional tennis again. And so I hope he goes really far. I hope he can get through to a really deep position. Obviously Rafa, but he's got a tough one against Riley today. We'll see how that goes. Somehow Rafa always finds a way to get through and respond to the challenges that anybody presents for him. Riley presents some pretty rough challenges for everybody. So that'll be an interesting one. I think if Rafa can get past that match, he's got to be the favorite.
Yeah, absolutely. Still undefeated in 2022. Incredible. Brad Stine, pleasure. As I said, a titan in the game, has coached some of the greats that we've seen in the last 20, 30 years, and a budding broadcaster as well. So thanks for joining Tennis Channel Insight, and really a pleasure chatting with you, and good luck with Tommy Paul and working with him going forward.
Thanks a lot, Mitch. I really appreciate it. It was fun.